Right, let's bring in our panel, Grahame Morris and Bruce Hawker, and I do want to talk about the presidential debate and what a scene that was. But let's just start on this greyhounds issue, because I reckon there's a fascinating political conundrum here for Mike Baird. I mean, on the one hand, we applaud principled positions that aren't necessarily politically popular when leaders make a call that they genuinely believe in. And arguably, this is part of Malcolm Turnbull's problem at the moment, that he's seen to have sold out on certain principles. Here is Mike Baird taking a principled position that maybe his party doesn't fully like, maybe the electorate doesn't fully like. Do we applaud that, or do we applaud a politician who can acknowledge, I got it wrong, I've listened, I'm reacting, I'm not going to go ahead with this ban? How does this play out? Grahame Morris, what do you reckon?
I think it takes a lot of guts for any leader to say, look, I acted prematurely, I got it wrong. I should declare that a while ago, my Sydney colleagues were helping the greyhound industry. We're not anymore. Okay. John Howard would have said, there are a couple of things he backed down on petrol excise, and one of the most important political decisions he'd made. And I think this is important for the Premier. There was some principles there, some good Liberal principles that he went over the top of, and that is wiping out an entire industry simply because Four Corners got their knickers in a twist.
Well, but there was legitimate reporting and so on about problems.
But this is very, very important for the greyhound industry. If they wake up tomorrow and find that the Premier has given them an extra lease of life, it is very, very important that they clean up their industry. And it's almost have a Dob in a Drongo's sort of year. But or the industry will be in trouble. But I do hope that the Premier has seen sense. You cannot close down an industry without giving them many, many years to sort themselves out.
This, Bruce, really, I mean, look, my view on this all along has been that it was just so sudden. There was just no real, indications that they were going to go with a complete industry ban from next year. But this has become a real political dilemma here for Mike Baird now. What do you think about the way forward for him on this?
Look, I think it's going to be difficult either way. If he goes and does a complete backflip on his earlier decision, then clearly that raises questions about his strength and his ability to actually lead the state, because they've passed legislation. And at the extreme end of the equation, you actually have to ask, well, if he were to do a complete backflip, does that raise questions about his own premiership, not just the deputy's premiership, but his own?
But if he doesn't, is this also a leadership problem for him as well, if he sticks by the ban?
And exactly. So I think he's got himself into a heck of a muddle here. I don't think he can stick with the existing arrangements. There's just far too much tension building up inside the National Party, particularly as you saw from the report from Jennifer a few minutes ago. So I don't think there's any real prospect that he can stick with what he's doing. What he's probably going to say, in my guess, is that, we'll give them a 3-year moratorium on this, and we'll see how they go at the end of that period to get him past this critical by-election in Orange that's coming up in the next few weeks. But I don't think that's going to be a particularly well-received proposition either, because it still raises questions about why he went so extremely hard against, what is basically just, essentially a working class.
And let's face it, a moratorium would leave those people in real limbo land, wouldn't they? I mean, should they keep investing in sheds and whatever other infrastructure they need for their business or not? Anyway, look, we'll see where this goes tomorrow.
But there are good judges, David, tell me they have never seen the New South Wales backbench as grumpy, as furious with their leaders as we have at the moment. This will solve it.
The presidential debate. Bruce, I'll let you go first on this. What did you make of that 90-minute spectacle today?
Well, they may have been talking about going high in principle, but I thought they were all both going pretty low and hard.
Sure did.
Look, in the case of Trump, he obviously had to try to drag Hillary Clinton down into the mire where he is. In the
hope he did successfully?
I think he had some success with that because of the association with Bill Clinton and the 4 women who were in the audience who claimed that they'd been sexually molested or whatever by Bill Clinton. I think that was always going to make it more difficult for her to go full throttle at him. And I think I detected in her a certain resistance to doing that for that very reason. In some ways, I thought she won the debate, but I don't think she won it as handsomely as she did the first debate. And perhaps we were just comparing him with his abysmal performance in his first debate than with his performance in the second debate, rather than how he went against her. I don't think it's going to, in the long run, make much difference to what happens in the election campaign, I've got to say. I'm sure that people have made up their mind about this issue now. It's just a question of whether they're going to get him out to vote on the day.
Yeah, Grahame, what did you think of this one?
Look, I thought Hillary just won it. Trump gets into trouble when you're on heavy stuff like foreign affairs and whatnot, and his sort of generalist approach looks a bit odd. But when he got back onto the political stuff, you know, I thought it was a bit of a draw, really. But imagine being Trump's campaign director or political advisor. You say, hey, boss, we've upset a lot of minorities lately. Is there anyone else? Have you said anything else out there? Well, I might have said something about women. They're not a minority, mate. They're a majority. Oh, well, I think I might have, and I think that's the problem. Now that the floodgates have opened,
right? What other tapes are lurking out there?
But now that the floodgates are open, I think almost daily now we're going to have people come out of the woodwork with little clips from the past 10, 20, 30 years of Trump. That's going to hurt him.
And I think an interesting thing about this, David, an observation that was made by a commentator in CNN the other day, was that with him under the pump now and trailing quite significantly, all that the Clinton campaign has to do is to keep him on the ground. And if they can do that by a succession of these sorts of scandals, then that should do the trick coming up to Election Day, because we're a month away from it now, almost exactly a month. It's not too long to keep him down.
I think the sad thing is, though, I think we proved again today that the Clintons should not be anywhere near the White House ever again.
Well, I wouldn't say that. Maybe not Bill.
Are you saying that would be a worse outcome than having Donald Trump in the White House?
I'm just saying some of that stuff from the women today was devastating against Bill Clinton, and you can bet there's more of them around too.
Yeah. All right, now back here, the plebiscite debate begins in the Parliament tomorrow. Look, we had Simon Birmingham on last hour, the Education Minister, Cabinet Minister, well-known supporter of same-sex marriage. He indicated, because we're expecting Labor tomorrow to have their caucus meeting and announce they're against the plebiscite, but he said the government would consider a reasonable request on the funding issue here about whether to fund the yes and the no campaigns. We know that's part of the problem that Labor has, only a part of it, but nonetheless, I think that's interesting. Some greater sign, some show of some willingness to consider compromise here. Grahame, you first on this. Where do you see this going? Will the government, when Labor inevitably tomorrow says no thanks to the plebiscite, will they try and offer some sort of compromise model?
Well, they can have a compromise, and maybe it is on the yes-no funding, but that is only if there are papers produced which show which groups are exempt and do not have to abide by this, and which groups aren't, so that everything is on the table.
As in Get Up, etc.
Well, everything, people. What about somebody who doesn't want to put two blokes on the top of a wedding cake? Are they exempt, or are they going to go to jail or something? I don't know. But before anyone votes, we ought to know. And you could do that with a piece of paper that both sides agree to, that this is what's going to happen. This is in, this is out. Otherwise, you are relying on a yes-no case. And then I don't think many Liberals would be in favour of dropping the yes-no case if it's unclear.
Yeah, this is a tricky area, though, this debate about exempting small business, because, if the florist doesn't have to serve a gay couple, can they also refuse service to a Jewish couple? Can they also refuse, service to a Muslim couple? It opens, I think, a fairly tricky constitutional question here as well about discrimination. You don't think, Grahame?
Well, look, I understand all of that. The discrimination thing is quite difficult, but can you really tell somebody in an Anglican church hall in the bush that, hey, you cannot knock back a gay marriage? Now, that might be run by very good religious people who have a real problem.
Yeah.
Now,
I think the church example is a good one, because
the church would be right. What about the church hall?
It's the small business, isn't it? The cake maker or the florist or the limousine driver. Anyway, Bruce, just back on the prospects after Labor inevitably says they're voting no tomorrow. Yeah. Where do you think this goes? Is there any chance of compromise to get a plebiscite up?
I doubt it very much, and I think that's exactly where the government really wants to take it. And I suspect that Birmingham just going out there and making a few, probably faux promises or gestures to the opposition is really all about just trying to keep the impression going that they'd be prepared to actually seriously entertain this whole issue. Look, as I've said before, I don't think the opposition is in as bad a position on this thing as the government is. The government really does not want to have this come to any decision, whether it be in the parliament or by way of a plebiscite, because it's going to be so divisive for its own supporters. To get back to the sorts of things we were talking about before with Baird, the National Party getting particularly agitated about it. So I don't think the government is going to come at anything, and I don't think the opposition is, and I think the opposition probably has made up its mind that they'll wait until they form a government and then they'll do it if they can't.
Yeah, and Bruce, the thing is, and I know you've said this some time ago, that you reckon Labor should probably have backed in the plebiscite, but the politics, if anything, seem to have changed a little bit if you look at the polling on this, and people aren't as keen on the plebiscite idea as they once were, and I don't know, Shorten's maybe winning that argument.
Well, I think he is winning the argument. It's just a question of whether we want to see this issue resolved here and now, or have to wait until a Labor government has a majority in the House of Representatives. Because I think they'll probably get it through the Senate with minor party support. So that's the question. Are they prepared to wait and see this thing through? And it seems to me that they are going to be prepared to do that now. But my point on a tactical level, it was just that I think this is a much bigger problem for the government than it is for the opposition, and therefore a plebiscite would probably cause more grief for the government than it would for the Labor Party. Having said that, higher matters of principle are obviously at stake here, and there are real concerns about the impact that this is going to, a debate or a plebiscite would have on people who are seriously affected by the whole gay marriage issue. And I guess we have to take that on board when we make our views heard about it. But
yeah,
that's my view. I don't think it's going to happen.
No, I don't either. We'll see where it goes this week. We'll get a pretty good indication, I suspect. We'll catch up again next week. Bruce Hawker, Grahame Morris, thanks very much for joining us.
Good, Devin.
All right, quick break and then back with the last.